Why don't we jump on in? So I'd love to welcome all of you to our discussion today on how to build more inclusive tech teams in a post-COVID world. I'm Katie. I'm one of the partnership managers at Makers, and as part of London Tech Week, it's great to have you all here with us. Alongside our panelists today, we wanted to bring this topic to the forefront because COVID has really led a lot of people and businesses to pause, reflect, and really rethink how we work and how we can be better in the future. Diversity isn't a new conversation in tech at all, but the fall of coronavirus has once again highlighted just how important diverse teams can be. An area we'll touch on today is, where do employers see their talent coming from? For example, traditionally employers have looked to universities to source tech talent. However, there's new risks with less overseas students and of course the diversity struggles. For example, less than 20% of computer science grads are women. So today we'll be discussing some key strategies to think about when you're hiring, how we as a tech community can foster inclusion across our businesses and teams, and then finish off with an exciting part where we'll be opening up the floor for you guys to ask questions to our panelists yourself. So we'll jump on in. I'd love to introduce our panel today. So joining us, we've got Charlene Hunter, who is the founder of Coding Black Females. We've got Diana Constantino, who is Head of Education at Makers, and we've got Mangala Nanda, who is the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at Generation. To kick us off, I'd love our panelists to introduce themselves and share just a bit about what they do at their organisation. So Charlene, why don't you go first?
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Charlene, and as Katie said, I'm the founder of Coding Black Females. I'm actually a developer. I've been a developer for the last 12 years, and I set up Coding Black Females in 2017, initially as a way for me to meet other Black women in tech. Up to that point, I hadn't met any other Black women in tech, and I wanted to see who was out there. So I created a community, and it was absolutely fantastic initially. Great to hear similar stories and people's journeys into tech as well. Over time, what's happened is we've grown into quite a large community. So we've got people all over the world now getting involved, learning new skills and sharing resources. We're really keen on forming new role models so that people can see who's visible in the industry in order to get into it, but then also to make sure we've got opportunities out there as well, like training opportunities and job opportunities as well. So we've recently set up a coding bootcamp in Birmingham, which is absolutely fantastic and amazing. We've got 50 Black women being trained for the next 30 weeks, and we're really keen to develop skills and then get them into new roles afterwards. So we're doing quite a lot at the moment to try and get Black women into tech and make sure they're all supported. That's me.
Fantastic. And Diana, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Katie. My name's Diana Constantino. I've been working at Makers since November of last year, and my role is I'm Head of Education. I have the privilege of working across a range of products at Makers, where we retrain really talented people into entry-level software engineering careers. And we do that in a number of ways. We do it through our apprenticeship program as well as our boot camp. I won't steal Mangala's thunder. We've partnered up recently with Generation, and we are just fully committed to getting a range of people into the industry, as Charlene said earlier. I'm an interesting candidate for Makers because I come from education. I'm an ex-head teacher and have spent just over 15 years working in Southeast London, plugging STEM, plugging entry-level education, getting our young people ready to achieve anything they want to do in a fully diverse and rich area. So super excited to share some knowledge of that and what Makers is doing, as well as hear from everyone on the panel. Thanks.
Thanks, Diana. And lucky last, Mangala. Oh, Mangala, I think. Oh, you just froze for a moment there. You're back.
Am I back?
Yes.
Okay, good. Fab. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. My name's Mangala. I'm the Director for Curriculum and Instruction at Generation UK. And for those of you who don't know us, we are a global youth employment charity. We have a dual mission. One is to train young people who face barriers to employment so that they are day one job ready. And two is providing employers with really high-skilled, motivated entry-level talent that they need to improve their business outcomes. So Generation is one of the largest youth employment charities in 13 countries, but we're pretty new in the UK. So we launched our first program in March last year, which was our AWS Restart program. It's a program that trains young people for entry-level cloud roles. And since then, we've launched programs to train young people in data engineering, software engineering, and other sectors as well, like healthcare and hospitality. So at Generation, and to me, one of the reasons why I'm excited about the organization is that we really specialize in high job outcomes. In our first year, 80% of our learners got a full-time job within 3 months of completing their training. And even with COVID this year, we're still placing learners. You know, just this week, we got news that a few of our grads have been placed with makers, which we're really excited about. And about 50% of that software engineering cohort is now placed, which is really cool. And for me, I think that training to employment pathway is really important because that's what makes the difference. I guess the last thing that I'd say is I think our programs are really transformational for the young people who participate in them. So our average tech cohort is about 70% BA/ME and 40% women, and everyone is either unemployed or in unstable employment. And so I feel really proud to be part of an organization and the work that you know, makes it possible for these young people to get jobs. As for me, like Diana, I'm not a technical person and my background is in education. But I work with a fantastic team of instructors and mentors, and my role is ensuring that all of the learners on our programs have a really high quality experience. They meet their learning outcomes and they're ready to ace job interviews at the end of the program and get into full-time employment. That's me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all of you. I know it's going to be a great discussion we'll have today. A lot of insight from all the different sides. So as I mentioned this morning or earlier, in this new world that we now find ourselves in, we may have to rethink or diversify where we search for tech talent. So to kick us off with the discussion, I'd love to maybe Diana to give us some insight. If a business is looking to grow their teams, where is the best place to uncover some diverse talent? I know some hot topics that people have brought up before is retraining or apprentices as well.
I think the overarching place to start is there are just so many options. There's just really not any reason for organisations to not reach out in the very number of ways that they can do in terms of plugging any gaps. Growing is a term I prefer, and just making sure that the workforce is fully representative of of the community that we serve. And there are some great opportunities. Apprenticeships is one that I feel quite passionate about. It's a real easy way for organisations to leverage tech talent. We pay in the levy. It's money that companies are spending regardless of whether they use their levy or not. And the levy enables organisations to access apprenticeships at different levels. So that could be accessing our youth through level 3, possibly level 2 apprenticeships, or doing something like how we do at Makers with a level 4, which is a foundation degree. And it essentially enables organisations to access training programs for our young people, for people that are retraining, to enable them to jump into the tech sector. And the quality of the training being provided, not just at Makers, across the board in the different fields that Mangala was talking about earlier, means that you're able to not just access a wide range of candidates, but you're also able to take advantage of really high quality training. I would have to plug as well that this education is really new age. Our apprenticeships have been rewritten by the government recently, and it has been designed by employers, which is really important. And these apprenticeships are supposed to be plugging the gaps that the sector needs, and they're regularly reviewed. Which means that the talent that we are training and developing means that these people are delivering value from day one. There are also some other pathways in terms of accessing talent. Here at Makers, we're really lucky to have a pool of candidates that represent a whole range of people, so we can help companies access a more balanced gender. So we have a larger number than the national average in terms of training female, and we also have a large number of BAME developers that are just ready to go, and we have a variety of products to enable hiring partners to access that talent. So, back to my first point, no reason to not. There's so many avenues to access that, and companies should take full advantage and not let the pandemic stop them.
Thank you. And Mangala, I know that Makers works with Generation as a source to bring in diverse talent into our training programs. Do you have some insight on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, if we're thinking about uncovering hidden talent and trying to find, people who wouldn't normally be, easily find a way into the tech industry, we have to think about really inclusive ways to screen applicants into training programs. And that's something that's really important for us at Generation. So whether it's for our cloud program or our data engineering program, we don't require any qualifications whatsoever. We don't care if you have a GCSE or an A-level, because maybe you had a hard time at school, maybe your grades are low, but that's not reflective of your intrinsics and what you are actually capable of doing. And so what we care about is, the motivation of someone right here, right now, and their analytical ability right here, right now. And will our training program make an impact for them? Would they have a route into tech if it wasn't for us? So those are the sorts of things that we're looking at. And our selection process is designed to find people with the right intrinsics, motivation, ability, not necessarily the right qualifications, but the aim is that they come onto a program like ours, and that at the end of it, that they will be someone who an employer would be excited to hire and would be in a good position to hire. And this is why, I think there's a lot of organizations doing cool things like this to try and widen the pipeline and get more people to consider a career in tech. And I would really encourage employers to be looking at who these different organizations are. Generation is one of them. We are really, really keen to transform the lives of young people who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity. And I guess one other thing that I'd say that links to Diana's point about training programs being designed by employers or having input from employers, I think that that's really, really important. And it means that maybe, not going to university does not have to be the be end and end all. If there's a training program that's really tightly aligned to what employers want and need and expect, then graduates of that training program should be in a great position to be able to get a job at those employers. And that's our approach at Generation. Whenever we're developing a new curriculum for a new profession, the first thing that we do is engage employers to feed into the curriculum development process and to guide us into understanding what we should train our students in, whether it's the technical skills or the soft skills. I think creating training programs where participants are in a really good position to get a job at the end is really, really important, and getting the employer input as well.
Thank you. And Charlene, I think from maybe your background, you've seen initiatives that have worked, or it'd be great to also hear where you've seen businesses be sort of successful in growing their teams and bringing more diverse talent in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I've seen over time, I guess until about 3 years ago, when I created Coding Black Females, I thought that the route into tech was get a degree and then get a graduate role, and that was it, which meant that it was a really limited pool. What I've found since I've started is there's some really amazing people who are doing development roles, who have been self-taught, who have done boot camps, who are doing it in a complete range of ways. And I think that that's a really important thing to look at. You know, it's talking to the actual communities, talking to the groups like Coding Black Females and other groups like mine, and sort of saying, who's in your community? What are they doing? What are their backgrounds? And how can we make sure that we're employing people from those backgrounds as well? What I've found is people often come to me from all backgrounds. They'll either say, you know, I'm in this particular industry or career, how do I get into tech? How do I get trained into this? And what we tend to do is we look at the partners that we're working with currently, and we say, okay, this is, if you want to go down this path, this is how you do that. And the skills that you've currently got from your previous career can still be used. It's not as though just because you used to be a lawyer, which is a really prestigious career, you all of a sudden lose all of that and now you're in tech and it's like you're starting from square one. You know, there are transferable skills with everything. So it's about looking at the sort of programs that we can put together as a community, as an industry, and build those programs to make sure that we give the best opportunities. What we found with the bootcamp is we've got people who are aged over 18. We just have a limit of, there's no upper limit, so anybody over 18 can get involved. And we've got people who, like you said, they may not have A-levels, they might not have those sort of qualifications. Some of them are currently students, and we've had a bunch of developers come together and say, okay, how do we work in the industry? How do we learn? And how can we put something together? And it's actually developers that have come together, taking that knowledge from the industry and built a training program. And we're finding that that's working really well, because we're teaching them in the way that developers think, which is also beneficial to industry as well. And I think that that's the key thing. It's working with the community, working with developers to create programs to get people in from the right backgrounds. I think that works really well.
Yeah, that's great. I think that really leads on really well as well to then not only bringing those people in, but how do you sort of foster the inclusion in your teams? And when you are hiring, do you hire off a cultural fit, or are you just driving with that, just bringing people in and putting bums on seats sort of thing? Have you found, Mangala, from your point of view, when you are trying to bring those people in, how can you make sure that they fit into the teams in the best way, and sort of really the diversity is nurtured once they're in the business?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think it's one that's very important for us. So we, you know, as I mentioned, we've got a lot of young people aged 18 to 29. They go through our programs, and then we try and connect them to employers to get them jobs. And I think, you know, culture is really important, but there is also a danger when we're thinking or when employers are thinking about hiring for culture fit, that you just keep recruiting PLU, people like us. And so if we're thinking about diversity and inclusion, sometimes we have to employers maybe have to be a little bit, maybe go outside of their comfort zone when they're thinking about who it is that they're going to recruit, and you know, does this person fit our culture, or does our culture need to change in order to be more inclusive and more diverse? And I mean, I'll give you a quick example. We had a learner in our first cloud program. She's an amazing, talented woman who had actually first done a childcare diploma because, you know, her family were kind of keen for her to do a sort of more feminized role, but she kind of found her way to tech, and Generation was a place where she did our 12-week boot camp in cloud. And at the end of the course, we do a process of matchmaking where we try to connect learners to a range of different employers and help learners figure out where they can apply for roles. And this particular learner, and you know, in fact, a few others were quite put off by some employers who came and spoke about their environment. It came across as quite laddie. There was a lot of talk about beer drinking and all of this kind of thing, which I think would have been really appealing to some people. But to the women on our course, it felt intimidating. And these women chose not to apply to those employers and chose instead to apply to other ones. So I think it's a good example when we think about culture, and particularly for employers to think about if they really want to diversify and change their, the talent pool, then what are the things that they can be thinking about, big and small, to be able to attract, applicants from a more diverse pool.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that's it's something we find at Makers, that even the job descriptions can be, you think you're trying to be diverse and inclusive, but it can block people from actually applying from that first step. Diana, from a attraction and selection steps, what have you seen that can be more beneficial to make sure that you are attracting the right people and not hiring the like us group?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, just to kind of repeat what Mangala's saying about it's a common practice that happens. But I think where I want to start off is my last point about high quality training. And essentially every employer is looking for good tech talent. And it's at the forefront of everything we do at Makers, in terms of making sure that the skills that we're developing in our developers are what the sector needs. And so it's about having pathways for hiring partners to access that talent that's diverse. And so we make sure whoever comes through our doors has access to this high quality talent, so that at the end, it's not a choice about recruiting someone that's like us. It's about recruiting someone that is brilliant at what they do. And that's what we're ambassadors for. And that's where I feel real equality and diversity flourishes, because the conversation isn't about the culture or the background, it's about the talent of that individual. And so we have a resource, we're very lucky at Makers, where we place people in the right environment for their tech talent, but also where we feel they're going to absolutely flourish. And not to quote loads of stats, but they do just that. They make us incredibly proud. They don't just go on to be good junior devs within their first year. Majority of them are promoted and go on. And we build that community and make sure that they become the talent searchers of the future, and they come back to Makers and they recruit back from us and through our partner companies. But I suppose a lot of hiring partners come to us and say to us, how do you get that wide range of gender coming into Makers? How do you get that? And I think you're right, Katie, it's about really providing that support, about job descriptions, about every contact that you have with your potential future employees, and making it really about coding and about the tech sector, and not about any additional barriers that are kind of put in. We have some really strong partnerships with Coding for Girls, Coding for Black Women, a variety of things that just makes coding a realistic option for as many people as possible. And it's not a quick win. It's a relentless education program, and making coding an option for anyone. We're very lucky to have a history of retraining anyhow. And so we, in our original program, Bootcamp, we've taken a lot of people, as Charlene said, that were solicitors, accountants, you name it. We've had teachers that have come in and have been excited. They've had their own, as Mangala was saying, intrinsic motivation to want to change, and that's great. But we've also worked with some individuals that have been retrained at their organisation through the apprenticeship programme, whereby it's been a professional development opportunity that the organisation has used to move different people with different skill sets into different groups. As Mangala was saying, to break up cultures, to get a working environment that is more diverse, more busy, and more rich, really, in terms of viewpoints, problem solving, and the way that people are approaching different problems. And that's where organisations have really thrived. When, if you keep doing the same things, you're going to get the same results. If you approach something completely different, there's a whole nother layer that you can access and kind of thrive in. And so it's that constant education and providing platforms for hiring partners to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's not just the education of the people that you're hiring, but the education of the business. From Charlene, is there blockers that you, I guess, have seen when you speak to your network? Do you find that there's blockers within businesses that are stopping people from applying? And are there people we should encourage to be those sort of thought leaders within a business and really drive that responsibility to make those changes internally?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even looking at my own career, I remember when I was starting out, and I was starting out as a developer, and my plans were to learn about football and understand it and learn how to drink beer. So I remember going to the pub, drinking beer. I hated it just to learn how to fit in with other people, that I was going to be entering this industry. And I thought that was just me. What I found is a lot of people are looking at cultures and either thinking, how do I fit into this? How do I almost change myself to be part of this culture? Or I just don't want to apply and maybe this isn't the industry for me. So one thing that we do is we talk to companies and we say, when they put up their job descriptions, when they talk about hiring, we're sort of having discussions around, you need to use the right terminology. You need to make sure that you're not talking about a culture where everyone goes to the pub on a Friday, because some people don't drink, some people don't do that, maybe have a games night instead, just things like that. And what I found is people do have a lot of conversations about it. There's a lot of discussion around, there's this particular culture at work, I don't fit in, I don't know how I'm supposed to be a part of this. One thing that we always say is, focus on your skills, focus on development, focus on what you are as a person, as opposed to trying to fit into this box that you can't fit into, because that's not who you are. With companies, what I think that they could do is start looking at, like I said, the terminology on job descriptions. So don't have a list of 20 skills that you might need in order to get, like 20 essential skills that you need to get a role, because in reality you only need about 2 most of the time, and the rest of it you learn on the job. So, and maybe talk about learning in those job descriptions as well. So I often see that, once you're in a role, that you're going to learn on a daily basis. Talk about it in the job description, because that's something that you're going to want that in the people that you hire. You want people that are going to go out there and learn new skills. If somebody has taken a training program to learn new skills, if they've joined a community, they're really keen to learn. So it almost doesn't matter if they don't know 20 languages, and if they know one really well, but they know how to learn new skills. That's so important. So it's focused on that learning. And then once they're in an organization, maybe don't talk about culture, unless that culture is around treating people well and not having a bullying culture. If the culture is around that sort of laddish behavior, then maybe we drop that and you have different groups, so that you've got people that might want to do the board game night. People still like drinking, so have the drinking group, but have that separation, so there's somewhere that people can feel included. I've definitely seen a benefit of having that. When I've seen companies introduce that, it's changed the sort of interaction that they have within the community. I've seen that from Coding Black Females.
Yeah, and I guess that's a really good point to lead us on to, if there's so many businesses that do this well, but so many businesses that are struggling or are looking to make the change and realize that there is changes that they need to make. Do you see there's certain initiatives that people should put in place that is working, or are there specific people that should lead this change? And to make it, how do you make it a whole team thing rather than just someone in the corner cheering on diversity?
So I almost think it needs to be an everybody initiative. It has to be everybody. I think that obviously some companies you'll need to lead from the top, and sort of top down you say, this is what our culture is, this is what we're going to do for inclusion. But you need everybody to be in a position where they feel comfortable to call out that behaviour, to call out change that needs to happen. I've definitely been in situations where other team members that I just wouldn't expect have said, what are we doing about diversity? When I would expect it would be me as the only Black woman in an organisation. So it's really good to see that happening more and more now, knowing that there's backing from other people in companies. There's initiatives that people can do top down. So, get training for your lead team, the leadership team, to understand bias, to understand diversity, to understand inclusion, work with organisations and partner with organisations that have a foot in the ground, who understand what the different communities look like. So communities that work with ours, that work with Code and Black females, what we found is retention just increases because, yeah, whichever way around it is, that means that they stay in the company anyway. We find that people stay in their jobs because they know they've got a company that they're associated with, they've got a community that backs them. And I think that's really important. So know who to work with as well, to make sure that you're supporting the community in the right way. And again, you know, everybody has a responsibility in this. It's not just a leadership team, but that leadership team, if we can, should be diverse. So try and hire people from different backgrounds so that you have more than just one voice trying to make a change. Different backgrounds will mean that you'll have access to different communities, different industries, different people who can then give you more advice about what to do to make a real change. So it's almost this, everybody has to do something. We need there to be more training. We need to have access to more communities, to know who the communities are and who to work with as well to make a difference.
Yeah, Charlene, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, traditionally coming from schools, it's that 1% change. And I think that if everybody can do something towards changing the environment they're in, whether that be a school, a company, a small tech team, it's about concentrating about the 1%, because all of those 1% added up together make that big change. And I think as well, it's the responsibility of training providers like us to not just develop the tech skills, but the growth mindset that Charlene was talking about, and about just being open and being the driver of change. So, you know, if I don't know a particular tech stack that I'm going into, I'm going to learn it. If there's somebody that doesn't know about where I come from and what I like to do, I'm going to show you. And it's about that welcoming culture and that kind of commitment, no matter what role you're doing in an organization, that I can learn something. I can learn something today. I can learn something from the people I work with, or from the customers that I'm kind of interacting with. And I think to go back to sort of a previous point, if the organisation has that commitment that they don't know everything, that their programme isn't fully diverse, but they want to be, they have that want, they have that intrinsic motivation to do better, to be more diverse, that's what's going to make them that great company, because they're going to be committed to trying new things. Because the things that we're talking about and advising today, tomorrow will fall out of date. And that's the challenge, because as a community, we're constantly changing. And the pandemic will slow down migration across the world, but it will kick back up again. And so what is representative today may not be what's representative in a couple of years' time. So it's that constant growth mindset to question yourself to, are you representative? Are you diverse? What parts of society are you not having access to or learning about? And then doing something about it so that you know. And you know, drinking on a Friday, Charlene said, is fine. But what else can you do on a Friday? What else can you learn from that's actually going to make you a better software developer and you a better company, for me?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo everything that my other esteemed panelists mentioned. I guess one thing to call out is it would be great for companies to actively be thinking about how they will diversify their talent, and for that to be something that leadership are aware of, are talking about, and think are important, and are taking concrete steps towards. I feel actually really heartened by the number of employers who are excited about generation, for example. They're looking for talent. And I guess this is another point that is worth making, that diversity hires, there's a sort of stigma around it sometimes that, oh, I'm hiring someone because they're a woman or because they're BAME. And really, that's not the case. It's actually such a positive thing. You can have, highly skilled, motivated people who will work really hard, who will give you a huge return on investment, who will bring different ideas, viewpoints. It can only be better for your company. And when employers really believe that, then you see change happening. In particular, so I mean, I'd say, so we've had a number of employers that have recruited graduates from our cloud programs, our software engineering. Now we've got our data engineering program. And what has been really nice to see is repeat customers. So we've had employers who've recruited from cohort 1 of our cloud program, and then again from cohort 3. And it's great that that's happening, and we would like to shout about that and tell them to tell all your friends, you know, you can go and you can hire from programs like Generation or other sort of programs that are doing similar kinds of things and get really high quality entry-level talent. And then keep doing more of it. It's not enough to just do it once and then to sit back. You know, if we really want to change the fabric of our organizations, this is something that we need to keep doing. And I think, you know, it makes a difference to those graduates of ours that they've had others come in after them. Because when they've joined, they've maybe been, say it's a startup, they're the only, you know, Pakistani woman, for example. And 6 months later, there's, you know, somebody else who's come. It's not the same background, but there's a sense of, you know what, there's somebody else who's had my experience. And now they're working the same place as me. And now I feel a little bit more comfortable. We have a youth advisory board. So this is people who've gone through our programs. They're now working to come back and advise us on how we can do things better at Generation, both from a curriculum perspective, mentorship, how we work with employers and so on. And it's been really, really nice to see learners who were in our first program. They graduated in May of 2019. So they've been there over a year now. They're getting to the point where they're thinking about promotions and having conversations and seeing that happening. And then they've got people from newer cohorts just joining that organization. It's wonderful for the guys who are just about to get promoted, and it's wonderful for the ones who have just joined, because they can kind of see themselves, okay, in a year from now, maybe that's where I could be. So yeah, I would say the more that organizations and employers prioritize this, the more they seek out ways to widen their pipeline, you know, the more returns and the more benefits they'll see, and so will, you know, the people that they recruit.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I love that we've all just sort of agreed across the board. And I think there's been a sort of running trend there of investing in that sort of early talent as well, and the training piece. Just there is that sort of gap, I guess, with the mid and senior sort of levels. The diversity is much more of a challenge at that level, but investing in people who have chosen to move into tech from a junior level and run with that is almost, it will future-proof what you've got moving forward. Have you seen, I guess, tactic-wise from people coming in versus a mid versus a junior level? Obviously, from a maker's point of view, we are training career changers and moving them into their career and trying to launch their careers in tech. Are there different challenges for hiring those sort of mid-level versus a junior position?
So I've definitely seen a lot of a difference there. So the Code and Black Females community, we have people who are right from entry level who maybe haven't even touched code yet, right through to people who are executive level. And obviously the numbers reduce as you go up the chain because there's just less people in general that have really high tech skills or have been in the industry for like 10, 20 years. So what I find is that when we have a job post or a job that's being shared around for people who have been in the industry for about 5 years, 5-10 years, they're just harder to shift. I think one thing could be, again, around that, how do we talk about roles? If we're looking at a group of Black women or women in general who are over the age of 40 or 30, they might have children, you might need flexible working, you might need to be open to having part-time positions as well to make sure that people are able to progress. That's something that I've definitely seen happen so much now that COVID is here. There's people moving into roles that they hadn't considered before because they're working from home. So just having that flexibility there as a standard, that working from home flexibility has made such a difference. And there's people now that I see looking for part-time roles. There's not enough out there. But I know that if they'd applied for the full-time role and then said, I want to go part-time, then that role would be available to them. I think it's really, really important that we look at that and we say, okay, it's great for the entry-level people. I think there's a lot there. when we get to more senior levels, it gets a lot harder to recruit in general. And I think we need to make sure those conditions are right to suit everybody, not just people who might not have any caring responsibilities, who may not have any other things that, you know, are going to demand their time in the same way. So make sure that you have flexible working, make sure that you make it suitable for them, and also look in the right places as well. I do often get told that, you know, how do I find senior talent? How do I find talent that's, you know, above entry level? I'm like, come to us, we've got loads of women who are looking for roles right now. And some people do, some people don't. It's just, I think that people need to definitely reach out to the community in the right way, know who's got that set of people who are at entry level, but also at senior level too, so that you can hire from those people. And I guess the other thing is that if you're in a mid-level role, you might not want to leave with that risk of not being able to get promoted. You might not want to do that. So make sure that you create those training programs for people to go between mid-level to senior level, between senior to lead. You know, we're going to be doing quite a lot of work soon to create those mid-level training programs so that we can see more Black women in lead roles, and that's in their organizations or as a career change, you know, as a job change. So it's really important to make sure that those training programs exist as well, not just entry level, but also for people who are more senior. And I think we need to also consider people from different backgrounds. You have a lot of people who go into freelancing and contracting. Does that mean that they're then not classed as someone who's been in an industry with senior level for 10 years? No, it doesn't. It means that they've got really valuable skills. So consider what they were doing when they were freelancing. They were running a business, and when they were contracting, they were running a business, and they were understanding a bunch of stuff that you might not necessarily consider as leading a team, but they were running a business and doing a lot of other really valuable skills. So I think it's about understanding those people who are at those levels, make sure that we've got those training programs in place, and also reach out to the right communities, the right people, to find people with those tech skills at that level.
Yeah, Charlene, I couldn't agree more. And I also think as well that communities are really important. And I think they're big change shapers. At Makers, we have a huge alumni community. And so a lot of our junior developers go on to be mid developers, senior developers. And then we really ask them to kind of reach out and not just offer opportunities to the junior community, but also share information about what people are looking for in terms of recruitment. And so it becomes a more open platform for people to have access to. And also, you know, the peer learning platforms are great opportunities for individuals to come together as little teams and develop different skill sets which make you a unique candidate. We've done some work around events like Hack for Heroes, which are separate kind of hackathons that encourage different people from different backgrounds, from different levels, from different organisations to come together and work on a common theme. And we found that some of the mid-developers applying for roles that have that kind of experience on their CV really does actually platform them into some senior positions. And so, you know, I'd say that any sort of help in terms of encouraging events like that and opportunities for mid-level developers from a range of communities to have access to that really opens doors at senior levels, because it's that kind of breadth of skill that they're looking for. It's not just technical. It's what we were talking about earlier, that growth mindset, that managerial skill. And so it's about providing opportunities that maybe they haven't had because it's been a struggle anyhow getting into the sector, so that, you know, when they are presented with an opportunity to apply, they're being canvassed in the best possible light. So I think loads of those kinds of events kept going, despite what's happening in the world going on. And, you know, your point about COVID is absolutely right. With every kind of negative opportunity, there's a positive. And I think that anyone that was not convinced that remote working couldn't work or would have an impact on the team has been massively proven wrong in these times, because the tech industry is flourishing and is still working. And so that's more than ever a reason to consider, as Charlene says, flexible working, part-time working, because, you know, regardless of gender or background, there are needs sometimes for that remote working and that flexible working. It might not be children, that might just be medical issues, for example. And what we've seen is that it can work, not just as a minimum service provision, but actually teams have excelled because there's been reflection time built in to working remotely, and there's been opportunities really to kind of progress with all the usual traditional ways. We haven't been stifled by pair programming online, we haven't been stifled by team meetings, and it shows the real resilience that's available in these times. And I think companies should take stock of that and think, you know, how can we future-proof this so that's an opportunity for the future.
So our experience in Generation is very much about entry-level talent. We try and find these young people who would never have dreamt of a career in tech and kind of get them in there. But it's interesting to hear you talk about transitioning into mid and more senior roles, because that's actually something that we've started thinking about more and more now that our juniors are on that journey in the workplaces that they're currently in, and to think about how we can really support them to be able to progress, given that it does feel hard for them. You know, we've had feedback sometimes that, you know, I don't know who to ask how to lead a meeting, or I've never done that before, or you know, they don't have the cultural capital in some ways that other people might have to be able to just know or have the contacts or the networks to be able to make that project progression and go to the next step. So I'm actually really excited, because this is something that we're doing with Makers, is thinking about how we can provide a package of support for helping juniors transition into mids. And this being, you know, not about the technical stuff, because that's all covered, but in terms of professionalism, and how do you switch your mindset from being someone who's just entered an organization to having a slightly different set of responsibilities. And I think this is quite a cool project, so I'll take a moment to tell you folks about it. But our plan is to go and interview a bunch of different people who've recently made that transition, to interview their employers, and to really get a lot of data about what is hard about transitioning and taking that step up. What are the things that you found difficult? What were the things that were easy? Where did you need to get help? And to gather all of that data and to try and put together some kind of training offering for our graduates down the line. So not, you know, after our 12-week boot camp when they enter, but maybe, you know, 9, 10, 12 months down the line when they're thinking about the next step. And I think this is really interesting and something that we should, as a society, be doing more of. It's not easy to take the next step up. For some people, maybe it's easier because they've seen that happening. They've got role models in their life. They know how to have those conversations and how to take that next step. For lots of people, particularly from those who face barriers to employment or who are more vulnerable, they don't know how to do that. So making it explicit and supporting them with each step, you know, as both of you have said about training programs at the different stages, I think that's something that can make a real difference and can help us see diversity improve, not just at the entry level, but through the whole organization, which is, you know, ultimately, I think what we all want.
Megan, I think that's so important. When I worked as a head teacher, we saw so many young people missing out on university applications just because they were asked questions that completely threw them, and they didn't have that capital. They didn't have that exposure to certain things. And it's really interesting because as I've transitioned into the corporate world, that exists as well. So there are things, there's a whole terminology bank out there, and there's all those kind of informal opportunities when you're working that I think Charlene hinted at earlier, that, you know, if you have awareness of them, if you're given an opportunity and you're exposed to them, you can absolutely do, you know, get involved in them. Some of them you might not want to, but it's just really the opportunities that you've had up until that point. And so exposure and those opportunities in terms of building programs. I mean, it's something really small, but on our curriculum, we have this fabulous demo day at the end. And some of the people in the apprenticeship program haven't presented. And they just rise to that challenge, and they absolutely flourish talking about something that they've built from scratch. And so it's making sure that we don't just cover curriculums, that we actually get the breadth and depth of what the sector needs. And so when our devs go out onto the workplace, They're deemed, if you like, almost ahead of some of the graduates that have done a computer science degree, because they have all these other skills. They can present, they can problem solve. And you're 100% right, Mangala. It's about having that toolkit and just those things that our people have access to. They might not need it, they may not want to use it, but it's there if they need it. And then they can access all these wonderful opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I just follow up on that by saying, I think one of the things that makes our programs really valuable to employers and useful for the young people is that we don't just focus on the technical skills, but there's a huge focus on behaviors and mindsets. We do this on day one, on all of our programs, we teach growth mindset. And it's really useful because when they come to doing Python and they're like, oh, I can't do this, it's too hard. You've got a frame of reference to come back to and say, hey, failure, it's just not yet. Take a walk, come back, try again. And so those sort of soft skills and mindsets are so important. And it, you know, some of it is sort of higher level stuff like growth mindset. Other things is, you know, what is an appropriate way to respond if someone gives you feedback on your code? That's a useful thing to actually explicitly teach learners, because people can get so precious about the stuff that they do. And, you know, that doesn't work well in a place where you're getting feedback and you don't want to hear it. So in our program, there's a lot of practice elements in all of them. So you're working on the technical content. And then we also get learners to do lots of role plays where you're the manager and you're the entry-level employee and you've got this feedback and what's the right way to respond. And the feedback we have from learners is this is really fun. And also it's getting us to think about things that we wouldn't otherwise have to think about if we were just focusing on the technical stuff. And I think really for diversity and inclusion, it's really important to understand what those things are and teach them explicitly, because people won't know to that point of cultural capital. Like if you won't know because no one's ever showed you, you've never had that experience, but training programs can do that. And then hopefully for employers, what that means is they've got someone who has all of the skills right there waiting, and it makes it easy for them to hire them and for it to be a great return on investment for them.
Yeah, I think we're in the danger of making it all sound so positive, and I think what we do sometimes is really uncomfortable and not. So we put them in teams and we make it really hard, don't we? And they get stuck and they fall out with team members, but they come out the other side, and you're right, they just absolutely flourish and they learn. And so that when they join a team that is hard and has characters that they're not used to, they have this tool belt, they have these set of skills that they can actually thrive. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, no, I feel like there's so much information there that is absolutely valuable. From your point of view, I guess, and leading on from that conversation, are there people that are making a great change and that we maybe should look to, or are there, I guess, is there advice that you would say, look at what these guys are doing, or understand these initiatives, or taking these steps would be fantastic to bring into your business and merge into your teams?
So one thing that I would say is, I was going to try and put a list together of all these fantastic people, but what we're finding is Code and Black Females provide a platform for people to speak and to be influential. So having that sort of platform means that we have people doing public speaking all the time, which is a really valuable skill for work anyway, for getting jobs, but also to influence the community and to make sure that people know what your experiences were, and learn new technical skills and everything. So one thing that I would say is really key is to look at the communities. So obviously I'm Code and Black Females, there's UK Black Tech, there's Black BYP network, there's loads of communities that people can get involved with, that there's people there who are doing that, they're influencing the community, they're having a huge say and making a massive difference. It's really, what I tend to notice is somebody will do a talk or be on a podcast for Code and Black Females, and then I'll see them on 5 other talks, and then they'll be on loads more, and it's absolutely fantastic to see that sort of development. So that's the development outside of coding, but it's really, really crucial. And we're getting that through just internal talks and influence, but also external companies come to us and say, we're looking for speakers. We have a conference give us 5 speakers and we'll say, okay, great, we've got people who are here who are doing fantastic things, but we really want you to appreciate their value as well. You know, people come along and do talks, that's great, but also appreciate the value that they're bringing to you. It's really fantastic to see the changes that I've seen in Coding Black Females and in the industries and the companies that we've worked with. I think that what I would say in terms of how you can apply change in your companies is talk to communities, talk to organisations who are making a change, look at the initiatives people have. So when companies want to work with us, we send them out our partnership pack and we say, look, here are 10 ways or 5 ways that you can work with us, and we'll put a program together that works for you, for what you're looking for, but also works with our community, so that we can really work together to make sure that you're serving the needs within our network, but also we're serving the needs in your company too. And I think that's really important. Like, understand what it is that you're looking for. It might be diversity at a particular level. It might be that you want you know, your teams to work differently, and then look out for that. You know, contact the communities who are doing that work already and say, let's work together, let's work on this together to make sure that we get the right solutions.
Yeah, I again, I'm going to keep agreeing with you, Charlie. Maybe we should disagree about something, but no, I couldn't agree more. It's partnerships, and you know, in education things are sometimes a lot slower, but it's those partnerships that were kind of started you know, 7 to 10 years ago that are really in fruition now. And so it's so easy nowadays to reach out to different charities, to organisations. And really companies have got a pick and mix choice, because there's such a breadth of choice out there in terms of how little or how heavily you get involved. And I would also to reach out to the community that you feel comfortable with and learn about their experiences in terms of how they've gone about doing it. So lots of our hiring partners, we case study the work we do with generations so that they can sit on the sidelines and watch and observe and see how tech talent hasn't been compromised, and then get involved. So this isn't a judgment. It can be as overly committal as an organisation wants to be. We're confident in the rich source it brings by getting involved in these activities. And the only other point I would is just to celebrate diversity. So we have a list of our nominations and winners each year, and I just couldn't encourage organisations to do the same in their organisation or in their sectors or their mini sectors, whether that be fintech or whether that be whatever organisation you're in, to recognise agents of change and people that are doing that 1% and more, because the more we encourage and praise that, the more people are going to be inclined to do it. So I wouldn't, like Charlene, I wouldn't make a list, because I would definitely miss somebody out that was huge. Yeah, I'll cop out and say everybody that's doing something, whether that's 1% or more.
Yeah, at the risk of just agreeing with everyone ahead of me, I think, yeah, bang on the money there. Yeah, a special shout out, I think, to the employers who have this on their agenda and who are actively seeking out ways to diversify the workplace and, you know, change the lives of people who wouldn't otherwise have a chance to do it. So I'm really grateful, particularly, you know, from my side, the employers who've recruited generation graduates in cloud and software engineering, data engineering. And yeah, I would just encourage employers to keep it on their agenda and keep seeking out organizations, ours and others, where they can keep doing that.
Some great advice there, definitely. And I agree, there's the businesses that are doing well, and it's on their list of making that change is this first step in the right direction. Before we move on to, I guess, our question time and everyone can start asking their own, we are now living in a remote first world. And I know, Charlene, you mentioned before that it does open up a few doors for us to reach different people in different communities. But do you have any advice for now that we are remote, now that we are basically speaking to everyone from our living rooms, how does that affect diversity, and what can we do to keep pushing that diversity piece now that we are all remote and we aren't able to interact with everyone in the office?
So I would say that there's a balance, right? So one thing with us all being in our living rooms working all the time and maybe having children running around depending on what your life is like, that can be difficult as well. So some of that, I think people need to respect that people might need some boundaries. You might need to switch off your screen sometimes and shut off, I think, from that technical world. So I think on one hand, it's supporting that and making sure that people are supported through that. I think in terms of making sure that we're able to reach more people, what I've seen is we're having events now that are completely worldwide, which is absolutely fantastic. So we can create an event at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we've got the whole world involved, and it's absolutely fantastic. So I think that it's, to communicate with the right people so that you can tap into those markets, tap into people who are worldwide. You're able to hire now throughout the world, and that could be something that can really continue into the future. You'll need to make sure that you've got the right environment to support the people that you could be hiring all over the world. But there's a lot of companies that are already doing it really successfully, that already have a completely remote working culture, and they've got people that are being really supported. Make sure that you've got some sort of mentoring system in your company where you've got people communicating on a regular basis and supporting each other. But I think the key thing is to make sure that you understand the differences that you could encounter when you talk to people in different places and provide support for them as well.
Mangala, do you have any
Yeah,
advice?
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I think our context obviously is a little bit different because we run training programs, but I think one of the things that we have noticed is that, with having to run programs remotely, is that access is a big issue for a lot of poor people. People do not have good internet connections. People do not have laptops. And I guess that's a slightly tangential to the context and the question here. But I think if we are thinking about inclusion and diversity, we have to recognize that can also be a barrier for people. And at Generation, we are doing a bunch of things. Like we courier laptops over to people who don't have ones that work. We organize Wi-Fi dongles and send them over to learners to make sure that they can access class. We are trying to find, appropriate spaces for them to work if they live in crowded conditions at home and don't have, some of us are lucky that we've got a space where we can work. For other people, they're not as fortunate. So, thinking about all of these things end to end and is important. And I'm glad that there are, organizations that are doing that, because it means that those people can go through the funnel and at some point be in a position, hopefully, to get a job.
Yeah, I think that's so, it's so true. It's sort of the remote working makes you realize that everyone is sort of different, and it's diverse in not only just the people that we are, but the living environments and all that kind of stuff that you do need to then keep aware of. So I did want to, I guess, move on, and we can get some questions coming from all the attendees. For everyone that's here, there's a Q&A button. It should either be down the bottom or wherever your the bar is with all the, there's a few buttons there. If you just type in any of your questions, and if there's any that you would like to direct specifically to one of the panelists, please just flag that. But we do have a few questions already. So why don't we kick it off with, there's one: what do you think are the best practices for supporting women in leadership to have true upward mobility?
I would say that that's around training. So some of that's going to be around providing training opportunities to make sure that women and everybody has access to that knowledge, that those extra mindsets that they might not have had access to previously. I would also say, focus on a particular set of skills. So it's really important to outline what leadership actually looks like so that everybody knows what they're working towards. If you say that you expect all your leaders to be able to do public speaking, then teach people to do public speaking, and then say, you've completed that, so that means that you're doing that leadership, you're having influence. I think that it's really keen to outline exactly what leadership looks like, and provide training to give people those opportunities. Sometimes it is worth doing those women-only programs to make sure that people actually get that training, and that you know that the people that need it are actually getting it, to make sure that on that leadership level you're getting 50% or a good gender mix on that top level, you know, on that leadership level. Otherwise you just won't achieve it, I think, sometimes. So I think it's really, really keen to provide training and outline what actual leadership means in your organisation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Charlene. And I think, remember that this is a sector that learns by doing. So any kind of mini opportunities you can give women in tech teams, the opportunity to lead on a project, to lead on a particular aspect of a project, the confidence will grow. And I think complemented by a strong training program, you'll see a flurry of activity in terms of those leadership opportunities. So it's a community that learns by doing. So if you're constantly working by yourself and you don't have the opportunity to mentor somebody or to work on something and present, it's very hard to then, even with the training, see that that's a realistic opportunity for you. So it's just constantly embedding that exposure so that actually it's just a natural progression in a person's career to apply for that.
Yeah, and lastly, I'd say just make sure your pipeline has lots of women. It's easier to progress women if you've got women there to start with. So, you know, make sure that your recruitment explicitly has that in mind.
All right, a few more questions are popping up. So thank you, Callie. So recently, Callie started a gender decoding decoder for language within the job description. And there were a few words that were flagged as masculine, so decision or ambition and that kind of stuff. Do you, as women, I feel like those are still words that reflect females anyway. Are there not words that they shouldn't use or that would put people off? Just other thoughts on, from Callie's opinion as well, ambition is such a strong word, and you, as a female, you would like to be called ambitious, I would like to say, but is there anything that you can and can't use? And what would you recommend within those job descriptions?
It's a difficult one, I think, isn't it? Because I would like to be associated with ambition and making decisions. The difficulty is that I think sometimes as a woman, what I've seen in the industry is I'll be making decisions and I'll have ambition, and then it's sort of seen as too much and maybe you should go back in your space a little bit, which I completely disagree with. I think that one thing is, you know, we need to make sure that people are okay to be ambitious, that's appreciated and that's accepted and that's okay, which is why, again, I say, you know, if we have a real definition of what it means to be a leader, what it means to be in a particular role, and we stick to that, rather than ambitious can mean anything to anybody sometimes. So, you know, make it mean is willing to do 5 talks a year, something like that, so that it's really clear what it means to be in a particular role. In terms of what not to use in a job description, I would say, you know, try and think of that inclusive language, which is difficult to figure out what that is. Again, around not having loads of points to say, okay, you need to know everything to be in this role. Be accepting of people learning, be accepting of people taking on challenges, and the fact that failure is also okay. You know, the best leaders, the best people that we have who have done loads of stuff, they've failed, they've made mistakes, and that's okay, because that's how you learn. So maybe we need to highlight that more and say, you know, it's okay to fail. We accept failure here because we know that that means that you will learn. Have those sorts of conversations as well.
I think it's been really helpful on job descriptions where they focus on the minimum requirements, so the absolute things they won't negotiate on. So rather than trying to get a list that captures everything about what that person has to have, because you know, like the previous discussion, you're going to miss something out. And also there's all the stuff you don't know about that an individual could bring to that post. So if there's something very specific about the role that they need to have, mention that. And then, as Charlene said, just spend a lot of time talking about the cultural fit in terms of a growth mindset, a learning community, that we're just really interested to see what you could bring to this role and hear about you. Will tell you a lot about the kind of organization and the individual you're seeking.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I'd say that, you know, when thinking about a job description, it's not enough to just focus on the individual words. I think it also, the message that the job description is giving, there's a lot of other sort of signals that you can get from it. So, I mean, I think I like the words decision and ambition, but there may be other things that are off-putting in a job description, and it's useful to kind of look at it in its entirety. So while gender decoders may be a good first step, I guess it's not enough. So we need to be doing more than that to make sure that that the job description is inclusive, and maybe that means you can keep those words there, but there's other things that you're doing.
Awesome. And so from a diversity piece, would you say there's a different approach that you would take from, say, the hardware engineering side versus software engineering teams, or is it all the same strategies, or how should people change what they're doing based on the different teams that they're working with?
I think this is a really good question, and I think that probably front end is way ahead of back end, and I think that we've benefited a lot in the tech industry of kind of the transformations that are happening in DevOps and things like that, in terms of a blended philosophy in terms of using software engineering skills with back end services. But I think that everything we've talked about today are going to work for a number of job roles in the tech industry. But I think it's important to note that different roles are in different positions in terms of, you know, Charlene discussed what she's seeing now is very different, but I don't think that will be the same. I think within roles, predominantly anything that involved the back end or hardware was male, and I think that's changing, but I think it's not changing as quickly as how the front end roles have changed. So I think it's a valid question. I think it's a good question, but I think it's that kind of perseverance with all the strategies that have been shared today that are going to work and are going to enrich the tech industry and all of the roles within it.
Yeah, I think that I agree with what you said there. I think that with hardware roles particularly, it's not as easy to jump onto it, just because it's not as accessible. You can just quickly jump onto a computer and start coding, and then you're building something and it's there pretty much straight away. With hardware roles, and that could be building things on a Raspberry Pi, building actual robots or something like that. I think it's a longer change, but it's still a change that we can make. So there are organizations such as Girls into Coding, and what they do is they have regular sessions every maybe quarter, I think it is, where they have sessions for girls to build actual things. So they build robots, they build they'll do some soldering, they'll do some wiring and stuff like that as well, which is so important, because that's skills that may not have, you can't just click a button and it's not there, you know. It's really important to make sure that sort of stuff's accessible. So create some of those programs, run hackathons, run those sorts of events where you link the two together, where you see that there is coding linked with hardware tasks, and it seems like something that's actually doable. If someone told me to code a robot tomorrow, I would assume it's impossible, that it sounds really hard. But if they said you can use JavaScript to do it, or Python, then that might seem accessible. And if I saw that coding in Python made something happen, then that would seem doable. So show people that is possible and how to do it. Run workshops, run programs, run like hackathons and training sessions, so that people can see that you can use the software skills to build your hardware skills as well. I think that would really work.
So we've got another question here, where how do we support people from all the different groups, so whether it's women or cultures, their abilities, so on and so forth, to make sure that they don't feel like they're the flag bearer in a team and in the company for that group or for the diversity piece themselves, and make sure that they don't feel that pressure that they're sort of that only person there?
I would say try not to ask them to answer all the questions, which might sound like a really easy thing to do, but becomes quite hard in practice. I think that what I've seen happen, so especially with everything that happened with Black Lives Matter recently, every Black woman, every Black person I knew was answering questions all of a sudden about diversity in their organisations, and none of us were qualified to do it. So it's about trying not to ask those questions. And again, I think that comes from the top all the way down to the bottom. So if you notice it happening, if you notice someone saying, you know, women, tell us how to hire more women, someone else jump in and say, you know, that's not fair. You can't put that on other people. So I think that some of it's about noticing that you're doing it. And again, reach out to the communities. If there's somewhere that you see a gap, if there's somewhere that you see that there's a problem, reach out to those other organisations and say, we want to work with more women, we want to work with people from disabilities, we want to be more inclusive. Try not to go to the people that that's having an impact on. And it may be that they want to give an answer, they might want to get involved, and that's absolutely fine, but don't make it something that they have to either find an answer, which they're not going to necessarily know the answer, or they're going to have to push away their director, which might just feel really awkward. So I think it's about reaching out to the right people, but also other people looking out for that and noticing it and pushing back as well.
Yeah, I think one of the, I agree with you so much there, Charlene. I think somebody I spoke to told me something, and I think that phrase has stuck with me, which is be willing to do the work yourself. Don't outsource the work to the minorities and the people of color and the women to find out the answers. Be willing to put in the work yourself. There are a lot of ways that you can learn. There are a lot of resources out there. Go and find out for yourself. And then, yes, you know, engage people in a way that feels right for them, but don't thrust it on them by asking them questions that maybe they don't feel like they want to answer, or it's not the right time or the right space. So, you know, be mindful about the way that you approach people to ask them for input or feedback. And yeah, be prepared to put in the work yourself.
I think having lots of positive messages. I know particularly when the media takes charge of certain issues more than others, it can create divides in organisations and communities. And I think it's about having that open dialogue. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. What's not okay is to then not do anything about it, to not educate yourself, to not find out about it, to not ask questions, and to have, as Charlene was discussing, a one person, discussion where, you know, I'm of colour, so I'm going to speak on behalf of everybody that's of colour. You know, it would be unfair to expect a male in an organisation to talk of all the males in the tech industry. It doesn't work like that. And also, you know, it's not as straightforward as that. It's complex. And I think as well that it's really important to have open dialogue about how everybody's feeling, and checking in. These kind of integrated systems that people have generally in their meetings support diversity, because if you have those opportunities for people to say, you know, I'm uncomfortable with what's happening in the world right now and I want to do something, can anybody help me with what I can do to better myself, is a much better approach than something's happened towards women, so we're going to get all the women to talk about how they're feeling. They may not even be affected. They may not have realised the impact for that particular incident or that particular issue that's being discussed. So I think it's about a holistic approach where we're building in reflection and we're building in that growth mindset of how do I feel about this? What am I going to do to champion change if change needs to happen, or reaffirmation of something?
Yeah, awesome. Really, really great advice there. So one other question is, do you think it's worthwhile to set targets to be hiring a certain amount of people from a BME background, but I guess across the board, do you think there should be diversity targets that companies should be setting for themselves?
I actually think that it can be a good idea to do that, because how will you know if you've achieved it if you don't have targets? If you didn't say that you want to potentially have 50% of women in an organisation, you might think that it's fine when you've got 10%, and you might not do the right things to get to 50%. So having targets actually helps. I think it helps you to you achieve the right things that way. Data helps everything, because then it's not based on feelings. I think doing anything based on feelings means that you can make mistakes and you can get it wrong. When you base things on data, if you notice that in your organization, all the people from BAME backgrounds were leaving your organization, then you would use that data to then do the right thing to keep them inside your companies. So I think that having targets is a good idea. I wouldn't say that you then hire incorrectly with those targets. So I wouldn't say that you say, you know, we've not met our 50% target, so we're going to hire anyone now who is a woman. Still do it based on skill. Maybe you need to increase that pipeline though. You need to make sure you're talking to more people to get the right people in. Maybe you need to introduce more training programs to make sure you're getting people in as well. But I would say that targets definitely help do that, I think.
Yeah, it's part of the sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mangala.
Yeah, I was going to say it brings it to the agenda. It's something that people are talking about when it's a target. And I think that's the purpose there is, are we committed to doing this? And if so, what are we committed to doing? And therefore, what are we going to do about it? Yeah, I think there shouldn't be a sense of, well, you know, we'll have to just hire people anyway, and they won't be the right fit and they won't be good. Therefore, we're not going to set any target at all. It doesn't have to be a all or nothing kind of approach. But you know, this is the goalpost. This is what we want, where we want to get to, and these are the sort of steps that we're going to take to get there. I think that's a really healthy conversation for any company to be having.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of targets. I come obviously from an educational background where we've had some really challenging targets set that are unrealistic. I think it's important to have targets, as Charlene was saying, in recruitment and attraction. I think it's quite helpful to have that there, because if you're seeing proportional amounts of different people, there's a higher chance that you're going to recruit a more blended intake. I think sometimes companies have that balance of, it's hard to choose between meeting a target and getting the right tech person in the right place. And so sometimes targets can cause conflict with that, which I think everybody's kind of noted in it. I'm a much bigger fan of data reporting. So what is the industry average, and outing some companies that particularly are not doing anything. And as Charlene said, particularly reporting retention stats. I think they are big indicators of where companies are getting things wrong, and they can use that data to then get involved in different activities. So not a big fan, but I can see where it works in terms of recruitment and selection, but definite reporting. I don't think there's a reason to not have that, and I still don't think we're there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the insight there. One last question before we wrap up everything, because we're getting to the sticking point. But so we're obviously here to talk about diversity in this post-COVID world. Now that we are in this new world, do you see diversity being a bigger conversation, a more important conversation? Do you see it changing from your point of view? Where do you think diversity is sitting, and where is it going now that we're living in this post-COVID world?
From what I've seen, it's definitely much bigger on the agenda. The amount of companies that do want to partner with us, and it's not just a one-off event, which it used to be in the past. It was, let's do a one-off event and then say we've ticked a box. It's actually, we want to look at how we can have a long-running partnership for the next X amount of years, which actually then makes a real difference. It really drives change. If you're saying, how can we work together over the next few years to make sure that we're hiring enough Black women into the organization, knowing that you're considering remote working, COVID and everything, you know? So it really shows that there is a real difference. It's given me a lot of encouragement to see that people are actually wanting to make that change. And the sorts of people that we're having reach out to us, I'm actually almost shocked by sometimes, that people genuinely want to make a difference. They genuinely want to make a change. I do obviously notice people who are wanting to do it just for the box ticking, and that one I might not be so okay with. But when I see that people genuinely notice that there's a problem now and they've observed it and they're doing something about it, I can only support that. And it's so encouraging to have seen so much of that happen recently.
I'd say there's sort of two sides to this. I think that there's a lot of people who really want to do better because they see how tough it is out there. And that's to your point, Charlene. I think the thing that is challenging is that often, certainly in our experience, the young people who go through our training will need more support, more onboarding that requires more time. And companies are stretched at this time. The recruitment landscape isn't great. And so there's a sort of tension there where people really want to do this, but sometimes they also think, well, do I really want to spend the money and the time that I have on supporting someone and helping them grow and taking them through this journey versus, you know, somebody who already ticks all of the boxes and I don't have to invest that much in. So I think that there is that tension, and all I would say is that I would really encourage companies to continue to find the time and the space to support those kinds of employees and that demographic, because it will make a difference in the long run.
Yeah, I'm with both of you on this. I go through, I think as everyone does, I think COVID-19 has an impact on different people, and I think it changes, you know, you can have a certain understanding of it, and then the next week something may happen in your life that's personal to your work that changes your standpoint on it. But I think it's important to note the kind of worries as well as the excitement. I'm excited by the changes that are happening in the sector and the way that we're responding. And as we started the conversation today, all the opportunities there are to get involved. There really is no reason for anyone to kind of not get on board and see the advantages that kind of it can bring for everybody, really. But I'm anxious about the amount of time that people are spending alone. And I mean alone as in not seeing other communities. We live in a very rich and diverse area in London, and so it prompts us to see different people and to see different people doing different things, and it challenges us, the physical stimulus. So I think we have to be even more resilient and remember that those physical interactions aren't happening. And so we've got to constantly be ambassadors of change, because if we don't, I think we'll plateau, and it needs to be an upward progress that we're all campaigning for. So events like today are really going to help, and this constant commitment to checking in on our environment, checking in on our community, and are we doing enough, and could we do more? And I think if we get idle in that, I think we start to plateau. So I couldn't agree more with what Charlene and Mangala says, but I think we are right to be anxious and therefore put a lot more energy and commitment into making sure that things continue as they have been. And I know we're coming to the end, but like an immense thank you to all the charities and organisations that are doing things. This is not a quick win. This is something that is constant, as I said, and it's very complicated and it's constantly changing. And so it's this ongoing drive for a better community and a better tech industry, and everyone making a difference that's going to not let things like COVID-19 get in our way.
Yeah, definitely. Love it. Excellent. Well, huge thank you to all of our panelists. That was absolutely amazing. I hope everyone here learned a lot, and I know that I've definitely taken a few tips and pointers about diversity that I'm sure I can apply to my own work as well. Just a quick sort of, I guess, housekeeping. We will do a bit of a summary with all the key insights from today, and we'll send it all through to you all. But please don't be a stranger. Hopefully on your screens at the moment is our contact details and websites for Makers, Co-Black Females and Generation. So reach out if you've got any questions or if there's anything else you want to know from today. Otherwise, have an absolutely wonderful end to the week, and we will all speak to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.